Hi, I'm Michael, and welcome to Beyond the Screenplay, the podcast where each episode we do a conversational deep dive analysis into a film, or occasionally a TV show. Today we are talking about The Last of Us, the HBO show created by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann. I'm joined by part of the Beyond the Screenplay team, Brian Bittner.
Baby girl.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
And we're excited to be joined by Alex Wang, the visual effects supervisor on The Last of Us show. Alex, welcome to our show.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm super excited to jump into this because I love the show, love the game. One of my favorite episodes of Lessons from the Screenplay, our YouTube channel that we did, was on The Last of Us and the art of video game storytelling. We got a chance to sit down with Neil Druckmann and learn all about the different techniques they used in the medium of video games to tell that story. And so when I heard that there was going to be a TV show adaptation of it, I was super excited and very curious to see what the translation of it was. And ultimately, I was just completely blown away by it. It's a remarkable job that all of you guys did on it. So congratulations, first of all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Warning to listeners, there are going to be spoilers. We're going to talk about all of this. So if you haven't seen the show for some reason, go do yourself a favor and watch and then come back. Patrons that want to talk about this also for our next film club that we're having for our highest tier patrons on June 3rd, we're all going to get together and talk about our feelings on The Last of Us in general. But right now we're going to talk about visual effects and The Last of Us and its connection to storytelling. And so some listeners might be wondering, why are we talking about visual effects on this show? And first of all, we talk about lots of filmmaking things, not just it's beyond the screenplay. It's not limited to the screenplay. But also I was thinking about the visual effects and the role that they play in storytelling and in creating meaning. And so in the show, there's a lot of really powerful choices that the characters are making under pressure. And we understand that pressure because of the context. And if we don't believe that these characters are going to die from an infected, or that if we don't believe they're in this post-apocalyptic world where their choices are so difficult, we don't feel the emotion of those choices. And that's something that lasts not just when the visual effects are on screen, but even when they're not on screen. And I think people would be surprised to hear how many visual effects are there when they think there aren't visual effects on screen. There's surely a lot. So lots of things I want to dive into, but maybe Alex, you can just kind of do a brief bio of introducing yourself to our listeners of sort of how you got into visual effects and how you got brought into the Last of Us project.
Yeah, sure. I mean, where do I begin? So very early on, I knew I wanted to go into computer animation is really what I wanted to start with. Ever since my dad bought me my Atari ST computer, I don't know if you guys ever had an Atari, but this is pre-Windows, and I knew I wanted to be, and I knew I wanted my job to be involved with computers somehow, and I just love visual storytelling as well. I was really lucky at a very, very early age to know that for me to succeed in something, I needed to be passionate about it. I'm not one of those that somebody says, maybe I want to go be a doctor, or maybe I want to go be a lawyer. As much as my parents wished I was, I definitely felt like if I wasn't into it, I wasn't going to succeed in it. And I think I probably didn't really understand the word passion at that point in my life, but I knew that for me to be successful with something, I had to kind of be obsessed with it. Pretty much my senior year in high school, I just decided that I wanted to go to art school. Like I wanted to go through the visual art side rather than the more technical side. I took a computer programming class and I said, this is not for me. This is not what I want to do with computers. So I kind of taught myself early on to just learn how to draw the art side of things, to the point where I applied for Ringling College of Art and Design in Florida. And I got in and got a bachelor's in fine arts and computer animation there, 4 years. And then I kind of bummed off my sister for a little bit in Chicago. I just had to find a job.
It's nice
And
to
then
have family to do that. That was a key part of my LA experience as well.
Oh, I would not know what I'd be doing if I didn't have my sister. I mean, for many reasons, but that at that point in my life, to just have a place to a roof over my head while I was looking for a job was really special. And one thing led to another. I was lucky and fortunate to know great people, and I got an interview with this boutique called The Orphanage. Sadly, they don't exist anymore, but that was kind of my foot into the door, and I spent 6 years there. And I think that is the foundation of my career, because there's never been, I worked in many different studios, but nothing as special as it's kind of like your first girlfriend. Like there's just that sort of feeling and I'd say most of the guys that I'm close to from The Orphanage, including one of them was my boss, was at my wedding as my best man. So that's just how close we all have kept in touch, and we all are. And so shortly after that, I just stayed in San Francisco in the Bay Area for a while and worked there. And then I moved to Vancouver, where I just worked at Digital Domain and met a lot of great people. They're just really good people, good, hardworking, passionate people in this industry I've found throughout my career path. So fast forward, I'm working at Industrial Light and Magic, ILM. I've been there for probably 5, almost 6 years. And then the timing was right. I was just wrapping up on Jurassic World Dominion, the third installment. And I probably had a month left. And a friend of mine that I met on the show when we were shooting, he just out of the blue texted me one day and said, "Hey, my brother's on the show. Can't say what it is, but they're shooting Calgary. Are you interested?" It's an HBO show. That's all I can say. And I said, "Well, I don't know. Like, if you can't tell me what show it is," he said, "Just Google it." And I Googled it. And it's basically HBO, The Last of Us is shooting. And I said, "Oh my God, I could not believe it." So of course I said, yeah, I didn't even know if I was ready for it, but I knew I wanted it. I knew I was willing to take that risk. And I said, throw my name in the hat. I mean, they're probably not gonna, it's not gonna go anywhere. So one thing led to another, and I was offered to position. And it's basically, I'd say it's my dream position, because my dream job, to be honest, 10 years ago, 2013, I think the game came out, right? I'd say playing the game has such a profound, I'm sure fans of the game, if you've played a game, it's just different. It's just not your average game. There's a lot of great games out there, but this one just touched me differently, emotionally, like just not what games usually do. And I always said this needs to be made into like a film or a TV show of some sort in a different cinematic medium that's different than a game. So for this to be 10 years later with HBO, which is one of my favorite, if not the favorite show network, Craig Mazin, who just did Chernobyl, amazing guy, amazing writer. I think all the stars just aligned. I said, yeah, sign me up. I'm all in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Real quick, before we jump into Last of Us, I just wanted to shout out, Alex, you were on a podcast called the CG Garage Podcast. And I just want to direct listeners to that as sort of like an extended bio of Alex's career. But there's also a really cool lesson in there where you have a story about applying to Blizzard and not getting it, but at the same time, it's like everything that you were doing, you were showing your peers how serious you were and sort of getting mentorship from people and everything like that. So I'll leave that there and let people go listen to that podcast. But I just wanted to say it's cool to hear stories about things that people didn't get that they wanted at the time, but then to see how that led to exactly what they wanted in the long run.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll leave a link in the show notes to that, because that's yeah, it's a really fascinating conversation. And to Brian's point, I love hearing about people's crazy paths to where they ended up, because no one ever walks a straight line. And I think it can be reassuring to people trying to break in that you're not necessarily doing it wrong. It's just it's a winding path sometimes.
Right.
Exactly.
But yeah, I remember when the game came out, and I think my first exposure to it was at a friend's house, somebody had a PS3 and just started like showing off the game. And I hadn't ever seen a game cross over with cinema the way this game had. And so it was a real revelation for me when in that opening of the game is so memorable, when you're like playing as the daughter, you're in the back of the car, you have this mobility to like look out the different windows, and yet your experience is so curated and so cinematic and so emotional and so impactful. I was just, it was a wake up call for me of like, wait a minute, I went to film school, I'm here in LA to make film, but like this, I would do this. Like if games can be this, then I'm down to make games. And playing it myself and then getting to that ending was a really interesting example for me of where, while so much of the game, I was seeing it as like, oh, we don't need an adaptation of this to film, because this is kind of like a movie that I'm playing. That ending was so interesting, because that was the perfect example of how being a game made that ending more impactful, more meaningful, because it was almost in this meta way playing with me as a player. I've been getting some adrenaline and some, joy from all the violence I've enacted in this game. And now the game is throwing it back in my face. And part 2 kind of does that throughout the entire game, where it's really, playing with the form of video game, where you expect to mow down infinite people. And the game presents you with this kind of horrible choice that you have to enact throughout the end of the game.
So a choice that isn't a choice for you, the player.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a choice for you. It's a choice for the character of Joel. Right. Anyway, all that is to say, that game was huge for me as well, as just a wake-up call of the kinds of stories that I want to tell as a filmmaker can be told in games, and they can do extra things that a passive, medium like film can't do, like that ending, So anyway, so all that made me think, when I heard The Last of Us was being made into a TV show, my first thought was like, really? Do we need that? Because the game is already such a cinematic experience. But then the show came out, and my mom watched it, my aunt watched it, like everybody in my family has watched the show and loved it, and none of them play video games. None of them will ever play video games. And that was where I realized, oh, we do need these adaptations of these amazing video game stories, because a lot of people just don't play video games or can't play video games. And I'm so happy they have access to the story now.
Yeah, I mean, and exactly that. And just so you know, like just even talking about the game, those scenes where Sarah dies and at the ending, I still get goosebumps. Just has that kind of an impact on me, on certain people that really love that game. And I think that when the game came out, it was during a time where a lot of like GTA, where choose your own adventure, basically. And here comes a game that is kind of a little bit against the grain, where it's a very sort of linear storyline. You have to go through here, but it makes you think. And I think that's when Craig was adapting this, he basically said the most important thing is that this story is about the characters, right? And that trickled down to every department, including visual effects. Nobody supersedes the story of the characters, of Joel and Ellie, Bill and Frank. We're all here to support that story, right? Because it's such a profound and impactful story. So that's sort of where we never really want to sort of overtake when we're creating the visuals. They do have to be breathtaking, and they do have to, the most important thing for me is for the audience to just be immersed in that world. And if you forget there's even visual effects, great. That's what I want. I want you to really, because I think the performances are amazing from all the actors on the show. And I think that's what the show's about.
Yeah. Well, and so, okay. So yeah, so you're now on The Last of Us. You're part of this team doing this Herculean task of translating this game that is beloved and all this stuff to a TV show medium, what does that look like? Like, what does your role kind of look like as you're going in pre-production and production? Like, what does a visual effects supervisor do? If I were to follow you one day, what would I see?
You would be like, oh my God, I want to go home. Like, it's a lot of hard work, but every department, everyone works really hard to sort of make any show, but especially a show like The Last of Us, where the bar is set so high, there's such a big fan base. We shot for an entire year in Calgary. My job really starts in pre-production, right? Before we even start filming anything, because it's important visual effects is a really powerful tool for storytelling if used right. If you don't use it right and everything's kind of pushed, when you're sort of just starting to film and cameras are turned on and you're filming, chances are you're gambling with a lot of money and people's time, right? Things might not go as smoothly as you want, and things might not be possible. Things might not be possible for it to look good in visual effects in post if it's not done right. So my job, it's important to really start pre-production with the showrunner, with the directors that are directing the episodes, and just break it down, understanding where the visual effects needs are. My conversations are very much with the art department, because that's when they're building the sets. By the time we start shooting, all the sets are built. Everything's sort of pretty much done. If you want a blue screen here and there, sure, you can do it. But the sets are built with visual effects in mind, if it needs visual effects. So really, I have meetings daily, especially once we start to really get into where they're like, okay, we're gonna start building this. It's really understanding what the sets look like, and ultimately what the creative vision of the showrunner is, and where visual effects is used to expand past the practical sets or the art departments, what they can do. With that, also just a lot of previs, anything that is very much like the Alex, the scene that you talk about where they're in the car, which is very much like the game. We previs that to a T, because it was a very complex scene of originally. I mean, it's cut now, but originally we wanted to use a oneer. It was the shot was very much like the game, where we're following them, we're in the car with them through the whole time. And to do that choreography, I mean, you're basically touching every single department. DP, lighting, stunts, special effects, visual effects. So in order to do that and not for it to be completely a disaster when we're shooting, is to make sure that everyone knows what they're doing. Everyone has a plan. Everyone agrees on that plan. And ultimately, the vision of that scene is from the show, from Craig and Neil's mind, that is what they want. Obviously, you don't want previs to be so, you don't want to just shoot the previs all the time. Like that's just more of a tool to make sure that everyone's on the same page. You also want to let things be flexible, and things on the day, things are going to change when the cameraman's actually in the car, things are going to feel different, and she might want to do something slightly different. And that's all cool, but I think it's important that the HODs, the head of departments, are all on the same page with that. So we previs in pre-production as well, storyboards, and the amazing thing with visual effects part of why I really love my job is I pretty much talk to every single department. I talk to special effects. I talk to the DP a lot, because for me, talking to the director of photography is, I need to understand the shots, their taste, what their vision is for every shot, every scene that needs visual effects, so that we can help each other. And ultimately, where our end goal is to make the most amazing shots, right? So if it involves visual effects, it's very collaborative. And then costume, prosthetics for sure. is props. I'll talk to greens. Every department is I have to talk to them and just make sure that I'm not a person that likes surprises. I don't like surprise birthdays. I don't like surprise anything really. So definitely on the day when we shoot, I don't like surprises. I like to know, okay, if I'm not going to get that, that's fine. I know ahead. We have a plan for it, and so forth.
Is this a bad time to tell you that your first professor from college is a guest and is coming on the podcast right now?
Behind door number 2.
Oh, hi.
I'm really curious about so much, but mentioning that in that, the opening where you're in the truck and you're with Sarah, and how that was intended at one point to be a oneer. Can you talk about, was it shot to be a oneer? Like, was that decision made in pre-production or in post? Because I think that's a interesting language difference between games and film, where games in some ways are kind of long takes and lend themselves to that. Cinema can edit and compress space and time. And so I think it's just a really interesting kind of data point to look at.
Yeah, I mean, we shot it in pre-production. Everyone was on board to make it a oneer. So we choreographed everything from the stunt, the drive, the timing of everything needed to be exactly spot on for that oneer to work. I think where it changed to not be a oneer was when we were in post and we were editing. I mean, we have Tim Good, Emily, just to name a few of our amazing editors on the show. They basically are not precious about anything. Their job is to make the most amazing and interesting and captivating show, right? So, I will say that the amazing thing about Craig is he wrote with almost everything, and especially with Neil as well. And the amazing thing with Craig is he's not precious about anything either. If something isn't working, even though he spent a lot of time and effort into creating that, if something's not working, he's not precious about it. He understands the biggest goal is making the most amazing show. I think the oneer just sort of in the context of that scene and everything. I mean, it's not like we cut drastically short. We just cut a section off that we felt like we're just kind of trimming the fat off, and you barely notice that there's a cut anyways. But which means we probably didn't need that section. We weren't missing it. So it was more about that.
Interesting.
Yeah. As an editor, I really appreciate that, because I've actually gotten irritated in recent years where a lot of people, everybody wants to do the Children of Men oneer, you want to do those amazing oneers. And then you see movies where they've committed to a long take, and there are sections of the long take that just don't have much going on. And you realize that there was a decision made to do this thing. We don't actually need to be looking at this take this entire time, but you're locked in, you're committed to it. And so we have, as an audience, we have to realize we're in a oneer, kind of accept that that's what's happening, and applaud the filmmaker for going for it. But I'm kind of bored right now. And so I really appreciate the bravery and just saying, you know what, we wanted to have our oneer, but no, the audience experience matters more, and you make the cut. And I think that's the right choice.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when you shoot a oneer, with that commitment, you also don't end up with a lot of camera coverage, right? Because you're like, well, I'm doing this. Right. So I think that's just one of the other things is, I mean, Children of Men, they probably just, they had to do it. Yeah. They didn't have a choice at that point. Yeah.
And luckily they were really good oneers.
Right. I think it was a Q&A that we did where I talked about Daredevil. I just talked about oneers and how I'm such a sucker for a good oneer. And the show Daredevil has some great ones. But it has one that's just a little overambitious, and it's you see Charlie Cox get punched behind a desk, and then Daredevil crawls out and then does the most amazing stunts you've ever seen, and then falls behind a bed, and then Charlie Cox crawls back out, and it's okay, now I'm just thinking about what's going on behind the scenes. I'm no longer immersed in the action, which is the opposite of what you want a good oneer to do.
Yeah, that's not the point of the oneer. Right. I think a film like 1917, I kind of forgot it was a oneer. I think maybe that's what it's supposed to do. It's just that you're just immersed in if it's done well, you forget it, that you're actually in a oneer.
Right. Yeah. On that note, it was something you mentioned, Alex, was talking about, story comes first, character comes first, but then also, you're the VFX person, right? And so it's like, when you're in previs, is there sort of like a conversation about a spectrum of, on this end, the audience needs to be just focused on the characters. It doesn't matter if there's 10,000, CG things going on behind, there's a building falling over, whatever, like they need to not notice. It has to be there. So you got to do all the work to put it there, but they have to not notice it. Versus the other end of the spectrum, which is just like, look at this, like where it's sort of the whole point of this scene is to just show off the world and kind of show off what's going on, versus every spot in the middle, right? Where it's sort of like what is the conversation like, especially in previs, about sort of finding that balance?
I think there's previs and then there's concept art as well. I used concept art as another tool, a very powerful tool that I use to get an idea of what the showrunner, what Craig and Neil are after. I think the great thing about them is they pick and choose their moments where they really want it to be a spectacle or to show scope. If you notice the show, we don't really have, I think we have one or two drone shots. We're always with the characters, right? I think the camera, Ksenia, the DP on some of these episodes, they basically use 50 or 25 mil. So we're always very close with the actors. So I think with that in mind, where we can pick and choose where we want to showcase the scope and where we want to put our time and effort, I think that's really ultimately what's most important, because for visual effects on any show, no matter what show it is, there's always a finite amount of time and money. But for me, it's time, right? So, and just communicating that to the showrunners, like, okay, so when they're just walking, if we just show like the world isn't pristine and just some overgrowth and this, and maybe there's a little bit of damage in the buildings and destruction, just so it's not distracting, and that why is that building so new back there? But we're not creating this whole new thing back there. So it's kind of a give and take, that conversation. Just a lot of quick concepts to show, because the thing is, without a concept, or I should say, once a concept is bought off, and I talk to my vendors and say, this is what Craig wants. There's anything from 10 to 100 very talented artists that will start working on it, and will start to craft that shot for you to exactly what you want. So for me, I don't like to waste anyone's time. So I always want to, and Craig doesn't either, and he's been actually really great, and then just knowing what he wants through concept exploration. So that's sort of probably one of the most powerful tools that I use on this show, particularly for like episode 2, where we see Boston, where there is so much, where we are creating the world. I think it was really important to, in order to, we can get really detailed and crazy and cool with the concept. In return, that'll buy me time, because that's just one frame in the process of building that world from the concept. But if we just kind of went blindly into that shot without, and then just we're trying stuff in sort of like just called the visual effects pipeline, it'd be costly. And I think it'll be damaging to the final product of that shot as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, in that episode when they first walk out and you see, the iconic, leaned over buildings and just really big sweeping shots of Boston, that's kind of a pivotal moment for the show, because if we don't buy those visual effects, if we don't buy this as the world, if it feels kind of cheap or fake, then that really immediately kind of sucks a lot of the gravity out of the situation, where it's like, oh, I feel kind of safe because these actors are on a green screen, or we're in kind of a Marvel movie or something. And I think it's so great that this show never felt that way to me. I never felt like I was in kind of a safe, this is a fake, movie land. It always felt like the visual effects crossed that threshold of immersion. And I could feel in that episode how much work you guys were doing to just like establish the world and sell us on the world, so that when we're not looking at those big shots, it's in our, we understand where we are. We're in a true apocalyptic situation. And like Michael was saying earlier, now the stakes are so high. Every time somebody makes a choice, we understand how dire it is because we buy into the world. So yeah, can you talk about just the pressure of that episode, of episode 2, and nailing those shots? Because I imagine that does feel like a make or break moment for the show. Those are such ambitious shots, and they're walking handheld, kind of on an overpass. It's a lot of handheld photography, which is hard to do these big aesthetic extensions with.
Well, it's interesting. I was going to add that that sequence is also interesting because the characters are sort of in the same place, headspace as like the audience, where like Ellie's walking out and seeing everything in the city in the daylight for the first time. And so it's an interesting like moment where the visual effects are having to do a lot of the storytelling, because it's what the characters are experiencing for the audience too. So yeah, talking through this sequence would be great.
So for that shot, it's funny because talking about pre-production, the one thing I didn't discuss or mention is scouting. Besides the previs and sitting down with directors and talking to the art department, one of the important things that we do in pre-production with all HODs is scout the locations. And for episode 2, because I knew it was going to be such a big visual effects episode, creating this world, and it was amazing because Neil Druckmann also directed that episode. So scouting with him, first of all, I was like, there's Neil right there.
That's how I felt when we did the interview. I was like,
yeah,
real
I know, there's Neil. But he's, as you guys know, like he's the nicest guy. He's the most laid back. So I really, when we were scouting, it was important for me to communicate with him what he liked about this location. If he was literally going to say, I like nothing about this location, I'm here because we're on this road and you're going to change everything, then I would say, well, then maybe we should go to a different location. Because yes, I end up changing everything, but the importance of that shot when they open that door and we kind of see that is one of the reasons why I didn't just stick a big blue screen in front of them. It defeats the purpose if we find a location and then we stick a big blue screen in front of that location. And I really wanted to embrace that space, that environment in Edmonton that we were. And for a couple of reasons. One, I think for the DP, for Ksenia. So if it's a blue screen, even as much concept art as I did, it would be hard for the camera person to frame, knowing what wasn't going to be in front, right? So sometimes that's half the battle when we just have a blue screen in front of us, is we're almost working backwards. Now we're like, okay, we're bought in on this camera move, on this blue screen. Now we have to make a world that is sort of in the space. Whereas what I wanted was more, imagine this is the space. How would you frame it? And the actors, where would they stand? And so the actors, I think also helped their performances because they were immersed in this world. And the art department did an amazing job just dressing what they could with the foreground. So I think that was the biggest thing for me with that section where they come on the hair salon and you see the Leaning Tower. And we went through a couple concepts. That was actually a very challenging shot because we went through a bunch of concepts and we sort of softly, when we're still shooting, we softly said, yep, this is pretty much what we want. But then Craig, when we're starting to cut the episode together, he said, this is the first time Ellie will ever see anything outside of the QZ. She's a QZ baby. This is like this world. We need to feel how much in awe she is as she walks out of there. And then he looked at the original concept and said, I just don't think this is going to get us there. And once he said that out, and I said, you know what? I totally agree with you. That's a really, really good call that he made with that. So we basically, through blood, sweat and tears, that was difficult because we built that whole scene. It wasn't just a map painting so we went through the one thing that I always want with this environment, for it to feel, for any environment, and especially in Boston, just because there's so much destruction, for it to feel real to a certain degree, is that everything needs to be done with intention. If this building collapsed, why did it collapse? Was there a bomb? Okay, there's a crater. If there's a bomb, there should be a crater right here. The overgrowth, rather than just have random overgrowth. Because I do believe subconsciously, when it comes to the world of post-apocalyptic, just the nature of it, it's very easy conceptually to turn it to 11, right? That threshold, you can turn it up to 11, and it can very quickly still look cool, but it just depends on the show, right? It can still look cool, but the audience will feel differently about it. Now they are like, okay, I'm bought into this fantasy world. And we never really wanted to kind of teeter that edge of, yeah, of course, that building leaning next to that building probably would have crashed into it and the whole thing would have toppled over. But what if it didn't? How would that look? Right. So we went through a lot of different simulations of how this would, in our nerdy programs, of how this would actually behave. And really what I wanted to get out of that was just a sense of weight, this building, because sometimes it's really hard to create. Again, I think the audiences, especially audiences on the game and watching the show, if they're smart enough to understand what is good visual effects and what is not, and not to this sense of like, oh, those edges on that comp, they look bad, but like something feels a little off or something just doesn't, and I'm not bought into this world. So I think for me, less is more. I think that was another sort of mantra that we had throughout the show, from the way things were shot to the way visual effects were handled, is we don't need to have so much noise everywhere and spend our attention everywhere. Whereas if we just focus our attention on certain key points and make that as believable as possible and as good as it can look, I think that's ultimately what will be successful for our show.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of really great stuff there. I was just thinking earlier as you were talking about, like, if you show us that, let's say there's a bunch of infected trying to get into a building or something like that, and you show us this like really convincing 10-second shot of that, and then the rest of the entire episode is like two characters in the building just talking or whatever. It's like, well, you've already done the work to convince us of that, and I think like that's really cool. And then also the less is more thing of, I'm sure in any department, it's fun to go, what if we did this? What if we did that? And like, I watched all of The Walking Dead, and it got to the point where they were just like, what if there were zombies in riot gear so you couldn't shoot them in the head anymore? And just like, it was just like, man, like it started to feel like every week they were just trying to be like, what do we have? What else can we do? And Last of Us is a show, for sure, a show of restraint, where it's just like, look, we want you to know the world is there. We want you to know the infected are there. We want you to know the apocalypse is there, but that's not what this story is. So we don't need to be reminding you of that every 10 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was thinking about, there's a lot of sci-fi shows that come out that I don't really hook into. And I think sometimes it's because of an inconsistency in the world building or even the visuals, where it's, I don't quite buy that this is a self-consistent world. And so because I don't buy the world itself, I just don't really buy the story, and I just care less about the fantastical sci-fi things that are happening because I just don't believe this is a real place. And I think what was so great about seeing this show was just, how kind of understated and grounded the world building was, so that it just felt like a drama. It didn't feel like a sci-fi show. It didn't feel like a fantasy show, even a dystopian sci-fi. It felt just like a straight up drama in a really bad situation. And I think it's a testament to, I mean, there's so many visual effects happening throughout the show, but it didn't feel like a visual effects show, which I think was really important for the type of story that you guys were telling.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the biggest compliment for this show is if somebody asks what visual effects were there for this episode. Mm-hmm. Episode 2 is a tough one just because, leaning building. Yeah. There's just so much going on.
And clickers.
Yeah. Clickers. But there was a lot of visual effects in Bill and Frank's episode with Bill's Town. More traditional visual effects of set extensions and whatnot. But nobody really talks about that episode for visual effects just because it was just sort of, for Bill's Town, pretty much seamless. In my mind.
Yeah, I didn't think about it at all.
Yeah. For that episode especially, it was really important that visual effects we just bowed out and just did our job and then just, shut the door and just left, because that beyond any episode, I watched that when it's rawest form after it was shot, like a rough cut of it. And I was in a room with my producer, my production team, and we were all just trying not to cry, right? And I said, I want this episode to be done well from a visual effects standpoint, and to the point where there's no distractions. We are talking about and feeling Bill and Frank's performance. Yeah,
no, that episode is guaranteed crying.
Such a
guaranteed.
It's so good. And I feel like that episode was a turning point for me with the show also, because I was really enjoying the show, but like knew the story and sort of recognizing some of the familiar beats from the video game. And I feel like that was the first episode that was like, no, here's something completely different. Like, this story is kind of technically in the game, but you're seeing it and experiencing it in a totally different way. And it's so effective. And it just completely blew me away. And so again, I love hearing that visual effects were part of that, because it's such a great example of like, that is a critical part of giving meaning to everything that happens within that episode.
Yeah. And it also gave us a great breather. And because we just, we just delivered episode 2, which is just visual effects everywhere, and then and then we have going to 3, which is a little bit more straightforward. So beyond everything, it gave us a little some good breathing room as well.
I also want to quickly mention that episode. Nothing to do with visual effects or anything, but just I remember I was next to my friend who I was watching it with, and when I realized like Bill and Frank are not going to be around by the time Joel and Ellie get there, I reached over and I grabbed his arm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like the main characters and the main character of this episode are just not even going to see each other, and I was so blown away by that change and how effective that was. But then, of course, a lot of the criticism of that was, well, then what does this episode have to do with the show, But it's bookended with these Joel and Ellie scenes where, of course, Joel doesn't know if he's committing to this girl and actually doing anything with her. But then because of the note that Bill leaves at the end, now Joel is changed at the end of the episode because of Bill and Frank's relationship. And they never even meet. And like, I just thought that was the coolest thing. And I don't have anywhere to talk about that. So I just needed to say that. And say like that, like such a tribute to the writing, that it wasn't just here's a one-off episode. It was here's a one-off episode that still directly affects the main plot.
It also helps answer my question of why do you adapt this game to a different medium? Mm-hmm. You can tell stories like this you couldn't tell in the game. You can't in a game go do an hour-long story about
Cinematic.
beautiful love story about two men that aren't going to be in any other part of the game. Like you're kind of stuck in the perspective of the player character. And I think that's also when I realized, oh wow, this show is able to do new things that are so exciting, and I can't wait to see what future seasons do that are going to be new and exciting. I'm just it really opened my eyes to like, okay, these guys are doing it right. They're not like a slave to the origin source material. Like I think Craig and Neil were so smart about like, let's take advantage of the medium we're working in and make the best show possible, not just the most like game accurate representation.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think episode 3 changed the game. Even I think because the fun part with the show coming out was, I mean, fun and not fun, but we were still working on the show, trying to deliver future episodes when
So insane.
when the first episode premiered. So, but the fun part, and it was kind of motivational, you know, everyone, I mean, I obviously I cared, I had to care 120% from day one till the end. But I think the most amazing thing and difficult thing with this process was we were trying to deliver the show while it was premiering. But what it was really amazing was it helped actually motivate us to, because the audience was caring so much about it. Twitter was blowing up. Every Sunday night, we're just looking at the Twitter feeds. And honestly, for me, what was most enjoyable was the art that was just this form of art that we were doing with the TV show really inspired artists to just create more art about the show. So when episode 3 came about, I think that changed the game. People were basically like in tears on Twitter saying, what did I just watch? Like I was expecting a movie about zombies and I just like I'm in tears. Like I don't understand. So yeah. That's when I found out which of my friends were watching it and hadn't told me yet. It's just like suddenly everyone was reaching out or posting somewhere about like, oh my God, like this thing just happened to me, this show.
Strawberry emojis everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait,
Yeah.
when a film or TV show can use that Max Richter music like on the nature of daylight and like and it fits and it's like earned, then you know it's good. Like Arrival did it too. It's like, all right, you guys both earned that music.
Totally. Yeah, that's perfect for it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. When that song plays, I think my sister said she was getting a massage and that
Song came on.
that song came on and she was like emotional because of that scene.
Yeah,
The massage.
Both because of episode 3 and because of Arrival, that song is just like, I'm going to cry whenever I hear it because it's associated with very sad, beautiful things. The episode 3 is a great example of in the background, don't even realize there's visual effects. And then there's episode 5, the finale of episode 5, that cul-de-sac battle, which I loved. That was just a moment that was just kind of pure, like sick glee for me as a viewer of just like, oh yeah, like after all this restraint, we're going for it with this scene. But I thought the scene was so well done too, because it was so well constructed. It wasn't just random chaos. You know, very easily those scenes can just feel like a bunch of shaky cam documentary style. I can't actually see what's happening or what the stakes are or what the characters are doing. It's all kind of a blur. This scene was not that. This scene, I very much understood the geography of the space. I understood where the characters were, what they were doing, what the obstacle was in front of them. So I guess, can you talk about the planning of that scene? Because it was so well executed in that sense where the story was being told, and yet I also felt the complete mad chaos of the event.
Yeah. So the cul-de-sac was one of those scenes where even back, I'd say 7 months prior, we always get like an outline when we're in early prep of what each episode's gonna kind of be about. And my producer and I, we just always circled episode 5, cul-de-sac. Yeah, because we just knew it was going to be big. We knew it was going to be big for everyone, not just visual effects, but especially for visual effects. We needed to prep for it. And it's a tricky episode schedule-wise just because it's spot right in the middle. So you kind of, for episodics, that can be a little tricky with schedule. But so when it came to prepping for that scene, we prevised it to death. We got Frame Store did the previs on this, and we started with storyboards, and then we prevised it. The intention was always that for many things that on the show, and I think this is why it's so successful, is it's easy when you look at that scene to be saying, okay, well, let's just have a bunch of people in gray suits, green suits running around, and visual effects will just either keep it or remove it, and that's our scene. We went through the scene with the intention of what can we get in camera, right? Visual effects, I mean, there's no way around using visual effects in a scene like this, but I think with the mindset of what can we successfully get in camera, build, only helped us out in post. From working with Bear Gower, the prosthetics team, I mean, the Gowers, I think they are the best in the world. I think they're on every big show that involves any prosthetics. They built the bloater suit. They built the clickers. They built, I think we had 70, which is an insane amount, or for prosthetics and costumes, for every department to commit to doing something to these performers. That's a high number. That's kind of unheard of for a scene like this, which is a kind of chaotic battle.
You're talking about like 70 people wearing infected prosthetics.
Mm-hmm. Wow,
Prosthetics.
That's a lot. That's more than I thought.
Wow. It's a lot. I mean, we had different tiers. There's the there's the hero, where they spent hours on the prosthetics. Some of the more background stunt performers could just wear masks, and if it looks too kind of mask-like, that's where we can augment in post to make it feel more natural. But we choreographed as much as we could, and I think the important thing with that scene was understanding where the visual effects was going to be. What I mean by that is not just shooting it and hoping for the best, and then saying, well, can you work with that, Alex? So when the infected all poured out, we knew that Craig and Neil wanted, I don't know, 200 or something like that. You know, that last shot where they're all kind of pouring out, which became a full CG shot. That's a high number, which we obviously couldn't capture with our 70. Our 70, especially on a wide shot, is going to feel very small, very fast. So we all knew that was coming. So what that meant was just choreographing, like, okay, on the day when we're shooting, it would be, I would say, okay, so when we say action, give me 6 seconds. So in my brain, I'm playing like them coming, CG, infected, pouring out first. In fact, there's probably a Weta did this whole scene, and they did an incredible job. There's a breakdown of what they did. So I would say, give me 6 seconds, and then say action, and then have the practical infected crawl out. So that's kind of how we worked on everything. So, because I hate everyone putting all their efforts into something, and then me going to the showrunner or director and saying, yeah, I don't think I'm going to use that at all. I'm going to replace it. I just think that's a waste of everyone's time. So I wanted to think about it in a way where I could utilize what everyone's hard work was, right?
And so those 6 seconds, was that to kind of like create a plate just in case, or like what was those six seconds like by you in that case?
So 6 seconds of, I mean, it was probably more like 10 seconds, right? Because it's easier to cut that shot shorter. So it's 6 seconds at the head of the shot for my CG infected to crawl out first, and then to add to the numbers, we had the plate infected behind. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, yeah. Is there, and now I'm kind of curious, is there kind of a logic to like a shot like that beginning with the CGI infected and before we see the practical infected? Is there something that you're thinking there where it's like, it's actually
Speed.
Interesting. Because they're going to get to go super, super fast, inhumanly fast.
I see.
And then we're filling in the background with the normal speed.
Yeah.
Actors.
Speed, safety, everything. Humans can only, like, they're stunt performers and they're great, but they could only go as fast as they humanly can. Not that we made it inhuman in their speed, but we were able to kind of give them like a little 5 to 10% boost, which it still feels like somebody could do. It just felt more intense. And we had people stepping on each other, which they couldn't do either. So that's the reason why we started. That's just an example of where we kind of collaborated with stunts, special effects, and the DP to kind of make sure that everyone kind of understood where the visual effects infected, the CG infected was going to be.
And I think it's important that throughout that scene, we are constantly going between shots that include lots of CGI infected and then these like intimate moments, like in the car with the little creepy girl doing somersaults over the seats, or the infected that are attacking Henry and Sam as they're wedged under that car. I think the scene really seamlessly goes between these kind of CGI heavy shots and then these more practical shots with the stunt performers. And that really helps. Yeah, when I see a movie where just nothing is practical, everything is CGI, including things in intimate, spaces, that's where the reality starts to break down. And I think it's just so smart to have that blend that you guys have throughout the whole show.
Well, I think the opposite is also true, which is if all you're seeing is a dude in a suit, then your brain just goes, it's just a dude in a suit, right? But then when you do those little tricks, like you were just saying, Alex, of like, oh, we can give them that 5 to 10% boost. So then when you see the practical actors, your brain is already going like, oh my gosh, this isn't real. Like these are crazy alien creatures.
Right.
Totally,
both have their strengths. Yeah.
Yeah. You're basically you're like a magician trying to pull a fast one on like, hey, look at this, but it's sort of like this illusion is really what I'm trying to say. Just of creating this sense of like reality, because for me, there's nothing better than something more practical, and our show is so grounded. That's sort of the basis of The Last of Us. And I feel like just having something grounded, even if I have to augment or change it slightly, is just so much more important, which brings up the bloater. Everyone had the intention of shooting the bloater in camera. I mean, the prosthetics suit that the Gowers built was incredible. The amount of detail, it was so intricate. And we came really close. I feel like we came super close, but at the end of the day, what sort of led us to make the character CG was that it was just tough. There are certain times where you didn't believe that it was a creature that was this size. It felt like a guy in a suit because it was a guy in a suit, right? And there's nothing you could do better, practically, because the guy was wearing the suit. So with this CG, the digital character, we didn't want to do it for the sake of doing it. We wanted the audience to believe in that character. Like, this used to be a human that just over the span of a decade has transformed into this creature. Then that was the most important thing for Craig and Neil. So I think that's a really good example of the bloater.
A lot of times I noticed that when films, I think we talked about it with like The Dark Knight and some Christopher Nolan movies, where there's a practical version of the Batmobile or something on set, that often helps the visual effects artists, to my understanding, like replicate it in digitally with CGI, because you have something that's been on set, it's been lit with the lights on set, so you have a thing to look at. It's not just kind of just being placed out of nowhere into that environment. Did you find that was helpful with the bloater suit?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was what I was trying to say. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was what I was trying to say is having something practical there, even though we were fully replaced it at the end of the day. It just, that reference is invaluable, is gold to us, because when we got into posts and shots, and like I mentioned at the very start, really we have a finite amount of time. And when you have so much work, and you're just trying to buy yourself time, buy time back in the process of delivering shots, having something practical like the bloater suit as a reference means it's going to buy us more time, because we're not trying to figure out, oh, what does the bloater suit look like in this environment? Because we already know what it looks like. We're just making it look bigger and slightly different shape. But we know exactly how it should look in this space.
So much that goes into this, but it's always really fascinating to hear just this whole process. And it sounds like there was a lot of really good collaboration that happened, and even some kind of unintended, work was put into creating the suit that was useful, but maybe not the way that was intended. Just hearing all of this makes me respect so much the work that you guys put into this, and just how much movies and shows are miracles. Like there's just so many things that could go terribly wrong, or you couldn't plan for, even though you don't, even when you don't like surprises, there are these things that come up, and how you deal with them is so important, and it ends up looking great on the screen in this case.
Well, you can feel the love, when you can feel when there's passion and love behind a project, because when there's not, you do the thing where it's like, we're just going to shoot some stuff and figure it out in post. And, and that's when you feel the shot composition is all over the place, and the editing is just kind of random and chaotic. And I did not feel that way in the show, which was so great. I was so happy to see this show having so much love and care put into every frame. Because we're all fans of the game. So it was
and
such a nice surprise.
I would say that love trickles down to all the thousands of artists that worked on this show to help deliver the 3,000 shots that we had on the show. I think every artist, fans of the game or not, or became fans of the show. I think a lot of people in our industry, just because there's just always kind of this crossover with video games and visual effects and film, and with the game The Last of Us being so cinematic, it obviously crossed over even more so. So I think there was just a lot of artists that were just fans of the game and had that passion that you're talking about, Alex, that took it personally, that they wanted this to look really, really good. And there are times where it was a collaborative vision rather than just my vision of the show, right? Like I could tell this is really a driving force from an artist on a particular shot, and I just wanted them to feel like they had ownership on what they were doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, and like Alex said, you can feel that, and it's such a gift to the audience. Well, so why don't we go around and say what lessons we're going to take away from The Last of Us TV show, and I'm sure our lessons will be, we didn't work directly on it, so we'll have different takeaways. But we'll go around, and then Alex, maybe you can cap us off. But so to start, Brian, do you want to talk about what lesson you're going to take away?
Yeah, I mean, so much of everything we were talking about is related to my lesson, which is just how impactful it is to be immersed in something as the audience, but then how that comes from every step of the process committing to that, So just as we're talking about, everywhere from script into production, into post-production. And I was just thinking about, going back to screenwriting for a second, like if you're writing a script, you need every plot point and every line of dialogue and every character choice and every action. It has to feel like it's coming from the same place. So if suddenly some kooky thing happens or some character says this thing, it's like, oh man, I'm taken out of the world now. I'm no longer immersed, right? And that's just ink on paper, like that's just, even just at that step, it's kind of already important to be as make sure everything feels as organic and as cohesive as possible. But then you go into pre-production and production, and it's like now the director and the actors have to make sure every performance feels like it's coming from the same place, right? Like, how many times have you seen a movie where you go like, that actor feels like they were in a different movie? Like, why? How did that happen? Like, how did the director let that happen? How did the actor let that happen? And then, of course, costume design, hair and makeup, sound design. Like, I love nerding out over like costume designers being like, oh, we made sure that like the underwear was correct, or we did this, or whatever random thing it is that they're super excited about, but that they feel makes the whole production feel more of a piece, feel more authentic, feel more organic. And then, of course, at the center of that, we have the visual presentation of the thing, from production design to lighting to VFX to special effects to in-camera VFX to post-production VFX, right? And it's like, if any of that betrays the reality of the story, then all of the work that came before it can just completely get lost if just the lighting is awful, or like this thing, if you see those green screen outlines that you see in 80s movies or whatever, right? We all watch the finale of Raiders of the Lost Ark these days going, but like, yeah, but the movie's really good, so like it's okay. Like, this looks like Ghostbusters right now. But yeah, I mean, it takes so much work, but it also occurs to me just literally every step of the way. So basically, kudos, Alex, to you and the team for pulling that off, but also for anyone out there working on any department of movie, whether you're a screenwriter, whether, you're on the crew, whether you're an editor or whatever, it's just like, it's all part of the same thing. Alex, you were talking about the heads of department all having those conversations together, right? And making sure we're all on the same page. And it's just like, if everyone just really goes that extra mile to make sure everything feels as organic as possible, and no one is trying to stand out. No one's trying to go, look at my crazy, makeup I did, or like, look at this. I'm an extra who's going to like make sure I've got my face in the frame or whatever. It's like, if everyone is committed to that same vision, then you get Last of Us, you get Lord of the Rings, right? You get like these things that just feel like, I'm not seeing the edges, I'm just seeing the world itself. And I just think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's super special. And gets at so much of what I love about film and cinema, language and TV, all of it. Just, it feels like magic because it is like thousands of people, as you're saying, Alex, like working together to create a thing that communicates emotion and energy out into the world. And when it hits, it's really good. Alex Calleros, what's your lesson that you're taking from Last of Us?
I think just adaptation. This is an adaptation done right, and I think adaptation being done right looks like understanding the medium you're adapting to. So, I think a movie has different requirements than a TV show, than a game, and I think, the Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann understood what makes a good TV show. It's all about character. It's all about just great character conflicts and all the things that the game has to do to keep you engaged, which is like, games do storytelling through gameplay and through combat and through lots of killing people, lots of killing zombies. And there's not a whole lot of infected, fighting in the TV show, as is correct. Like, the TV show should be about character drama with the infected as kind of pressure on that character drama, but not the main event. And I think it just shows great intelligence and restraint that they did the show the way they did, because this is a TV show. It feels like a TV show. My mom and my aunt can watch it as a TV show. They don't even think about it as a video game, and it doesn't stand out as like, oh, this is kind of a weird video gamey thing. Doesn't even occur to them because it is true to its medium. So I think it's a great example of adaptation done right. Yeah.
My lesson is very much tied to that, where that's just the thing that I was so struck by. Was just extremely smart decision making clearly happened in the making of this and the design of this show. And listening to you speak, Alex, about different moments in the process where something was planned as a long take, but then the story was better and more impactful when that was changed in post-production, or like the bloater was decided to be shot practically, had to be changed to be CGI. All these things that I think demonstrate a willingness to be wrong, quote unquote, if it's better for the final product, if it's creating a generous experience for the audience. It's not about ego or stubborn, like I chose this a long time ago and so I'm committing to it. And I think that's really, it's hard, that's rare, and I think it's scary but like brave to be willing to change your mind and do something that maybe wasn't your first idea because the second idea is better. And I think that's I don't know, that's inspiring to me to see people do that. And I think watching the show, every single episode, it felt like that was happening on all these different levels, but especially in the adaptation, as you were saying, Alex, the things that the soul of The Last of Us, the game and the story, the characters, those things were preserved and translated onto screen. And I think it'd be really easy to look at the external trappings where it's like, oh, I got to be shivving clickers constantly, or like all the things that you
throwing bricks and bottles,
right? Yeah, all those. I think it'd be really easy and really tempting for many people to be like, oh, and that's what the show should be, obviously.
Right.
But clearly,
you didn't craft any health kits the entire series.
Yeah, what the hell?
But there are the moments. Yeah. There's still those moments where like it's just the little hints at it. That I was just super blown away by the really smart decision making and execution top to bottom. So many lessons I think that we can take away from the show. Alex, what about you? What lesson are you going to take away?
That's great. I mean, I can't top what you guys just said. I was thinking about this all day because when a show like The Last of Us, I've been on it for almost 2 years. It's a huge portion of my life. And met with so many great people, so many talented people. And I was just trying to think of what is the most important lesson that I've learned in the show. And I couldn't pick one, but I would say I almost just sort of backed up a little bit. And I said, well, what led me to this? And that's taking a risk. I had a job at ILM for 5 years.
Let's hold on. You had a job at ILM.
Yeah, exactly. As a visual
studio called ILM.
Yeah.
As a visual effects supervisor, I was happy. I was comfortable. I had no reason to do anything else, and I loved the people I worked with there. But here comes to sometimes in life, opportunities just drop on your lap, and you're at those crossroads and you go left or right, and it's up to you to take that risk and go right. And I went with my gut. Obviously, I talked to my fiance, now wife, because it was basically we got married right in the middle of production. Like at the end of the shoot, I had to jump off, get married, and come back to do post. Wow. So we knew it was going to be tricky. We made it work. Thank you, Amy. But I think for me, the most important lesson was just going with your gut. The risk is worth it. Do it, because this is the most amazing experience that I've ever had in my life, and the hardest. It was not easy by any means. It was very hard, physically, both mentally and physically, but so rewarding at the end of the day. Like I don't know what my life would be like if I had chosen no. So that's my lesson.
That's
cool.
That's a great lesson. Yeah. Okay, well, so really quick, why don't we go around and say what we've been watching recently, what we might recommend to our listeners. Alex Calleros, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So on the topic of shows that create a believable world that I can buy into, I've been really pleasantly surprised by Silo on Apple TV Plus, starring Rebecca Ferguson. I saw the trailers for it and I was like, man, I want more sci-fi shows. I love Rebecca Ferguson, but is this going to be another one of those shows? It's kind of like a lame world, doesn't really quite commit and doesn't quite do it right. It's about a post-apocalyptic scenario question mark in which a whole community is basically living in a gigantic 200 level missile silo for over maybe 200 years or something. They don't know what happened to the world. They don't know what's going on outside, but they just know it's toxic and you can't leave. It's a cool premise, and I wanted to like it. And I started watching it, bracing for the worst because I've been so let down by so many sci-fi shows, and I really like it. I really love Rebecca Ferguson. It's really fun and like really well done. It's a great mystery box story that's actually like revealing enough each episode to not be frustrating. So go Silo. I'm really pleased. I'm really enjoying it.
Thanks.
As long as it's not the best sci-fi thing she's in this year.
Yeah,
No pressure doing part 2.
Also looking forward to that a lot.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's good to hear. I was curious, so I'm happy to hear that it's good.
I saw. Yeah, it's good to know. Yeah, I might watch it now.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it.
Nice. Awesome.
It's no Last of Us, but it's great.
Sure. It's a high bar.
Yeah.
Brian, what have you been watching recently?
Well, on the subject of filming on location and, making a world that is fully immersive, I saw for the first time ever The Bridge on the River Kwai, the David Lean film from 1957, which is a big blind spot for me. And this war movie about British POWs in a Japanese prison camp in Thailand who are tasked with building a bridge, and the bridge becomes a big, part of the finale of the movie and sort of like a big thematic conversation going on. It's got Alec Guinness and our buddy from Sunset Boulevard, William Holden, and they're both incredible. But, thinking about it in the context of this conversation, it's filmed on location, not in Thailand, but in Sri Lanka. And I mean, you can just feel it so completely. There's so many beautiful shots where there's two characters talking in the foreground as we're talking about like the main thing is their conversation. That's what you're focused on. But then you look in the midground and there are 200 extras like toiling away at some task. And then in the background are just rolling hills because they're really shooting on location. And then the sound design, there's just always crickets and water and just these very, tangible things. And it's just like, it just feels like you're there. And how cool that we can, obviously in 57, it's just, if it was, they had to build the bridge, they had to build everything, right? And they had to go on location. And now we have something like Last of Us where it's just like such a cool hybrid of those things, right? Where it's like, yeah, we are going to Calgary, we are going to film, we are going to get all these beautiful landscapes, but we can then fill that in. We can add things. We can do whatever is necessary to our world that we would not have the time, the resources to actually put in otherwise. I'm sure we would love to go build 2 giant buildings, one of which is falling on top of the other. You can't do that, right? So you either don't have it or you add it with set extensions. And I just think it's really interesting to be thinking about these two things back to back with 70 years between the two of them and just see like, oh yeah, we're still doing the same thing. We're just doing it with what we have available to us now, and I just think it's really neat.
Yeah. And I love that we can be doing that for TV shows also.
Of course.
Like,
Yeah,
TV shows
Yeah.
are at a level and visual effects are at a place where that is something that is conceivable, so we can get the huge emotional investment and impact that comes from this kind of longer form storytelling. It's just, it's great. It's a great time.
So you have to do a 9-hour movie instead of just a 2-hour movie.
That's what it felt like.
3,000 shots, you said? 3,000?
No problem, right?
Yeah.
That's what it felt like.
Really quick, listeners of the show will know I have struggled at times with animation and animated shows, but I was pressured heavily by my wife to watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, which I had never seen before. It took me a little bit to get into it because I was like, again, the frames per second, it's not 24. I'm not used to this. But I got so sucked in, and it really is as good as everyone says it is. And I know I'm extremely late to this party, but it has a show that evolves. It starts off, it feels maybe a little bit like kids show-y, but as it picks up and as the arc of the narrative really sharpens, I would put it up there with, all the Star Warses and the Lord of the Rings, like in terms of epic hero's journey storytelling, where by the end I'm at the edge of my seat and emotional by everything that's happening. I was not expecting to be able to be affected that much by the show, and it earns it, and it's great. So,
Man,
for some reason, you're holding out.
I gotta get past those first few episodes, because I think I got it like 2-3 in. And I was just like, everybody says this is the best thing ever. I don't know, man.
It takes a little bit. It starts off a bit more episodic, and then it becomes a little bit more serial arc. And we watched it like on the weekends, like Saturday mornings, and so that kind of helped me get in the mindset of it's Saturday morning cartoons, and that pushed through some of it. And then and then at some point I was just sucked in, and I was like, no, we have to keep watching because this is so good.
Can I just watch the movie though, just to save some time?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
It's fine. It's the same, right?
Yeah. Alex, what about you? What have you been watching recently?
Because I'm involved in so much visual effects stuff, the shows that I watch, the films that I watch, tend to not have any visual effects. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm myself and a fan of what Craig and Neil have done with The Last of Us. Is so character driven. The last show that my wife and I really enjoyed is a show called Shrinking on Apple Plus.
Oh yeah,
with Jason Segel and Harrison Ford's in it, and it's a pretty simple premise. They're psychologists, and it's just the relationships that they develop with their clients. They're not perfect, even though they're supposed to be telling people how to feel and to a certain degree help them, but they need help themselves. So it's just this complexity of characters, and Harrison Ford is amazing. Like he's like the grumpiest psychologist, and it's just really heartwarming. Like Apple with Ted Lasso and everything, it's got kind of those vibes of feel good. And there are a couple. I don't generally cry at all, but I don't generally cry with TV shows or movies, except for unless it's like Saving Private Ryan or something like that. But I got teary-eyed on a few times just because it's just so heartwarming, and I think the story is very. You could see it happening in real life. So, anyways, I think Shrinking. If you haven't seen it, definitely catch it on. I think it's out on Apple Plus. Yeah,
it's on my list. Yeah, I want to check it out.
Yeah, it's funny.
Awesome. Okay, well, this has been our conversation about The Last of Us. We want to say a big thank you, as always, to our patrons that support the show and make it happen. Thank you to our producer, Vince Major, and our editors, Donovan Bullen, Caleb Berg, Graham Harther, and Eric Schneider. I'm Michael Tucker. I've been joined today by Brian Bittner, Alex Calleros, and of course, a very special thank you to Alex Wang, who you can find on Twitter at AlexWang_VFX. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. This was really, really fun.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great, guys. Let's do it again at some point.
Yeah.
Season 2, maybe.
Season 2.
Yeah, whenever we get it.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will see you then. Thank you, listeners. And we will see you, listeners, in the next episode. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.